Hello everyone and welcome to another SEJ Think Tank webinar. Today we're going to be talking about mastering social media for big brands with Debbie Miller, and she has a lot of, I got a chance to see this presentation earlier, and she's got a lot of really cool examples and really great information in here. My name's Brent Satoris. You've probably seen me by now. I've been moderating these a couple times in the past, and I'm going to let Debbie do a quick introduction before we get started, and then I'm going to give some housekeeping stuff to keep you in line. Debbie, go ahead and give us a quick intro.
Hi everyone, my name is Debbie Miller. I'm the social media manager for Search Engine Journal. I also have my own company called Social Hospitality, where I do a lot of social media and digital marketing for the hospitality industry. And I'm looking forward to the webinar today.
Awesome, awesome. So jumping into a little bit of housekeeping, I'll try to go really quickly so this is not, taking up too much time. If anybody has any questions, comments, experiences, please feel free to say something on Twitter. We're using the hashtag SEJ ThinkTank, and we'll also be taking questions and comments through the actual webinar system as well. But, seriously, if you have any questions, if you have anything you want to ask, just throw it in there and we'll make sure we address it either in the system or through Twitter. Again, the hashtag is going to be SEJ ThinkTank, and you'll see it inside the presentation the whole time. So if you forget it, it's all on you. We'll be asking a couple poll questions, too, to be exact, throughout the different segments of the webinar. Just an opportunity for you to give a voice on various elements about, what the presentation stands for and so forth. Throughout the webinar, if we talk about any tools, if we mention any elements that we can link to, we'll do our best to drop those links into the discussion, and we'll also put them out on Twitter as well. But if we happen to miss anything, just, again, comment to us, say, hey, where's that link, and we'll make sure we get something up for you. The entire webinar, all of the questions, the answers, the video, the transcript, everything ends up being put into a post that we publish on Search Engine Journal in the next couple days. So you can reshare it, watch it again, save it, whatever it is that you do, with that post is up to you, but it's there for you to do it. Without any further delay, let's jump into social media for big brands.
Awesome. So as Brent mentioned, I'm the social media manager for Search Engine Journal. I also work for Hyperis Marketing, which is a leading agency in the hospitality space, and I have my own company, Social Hospitality, as well. So today I wanted to cover three main topics related to social media for big brands. And even though the title is social media for big brands, I use big brands as examples in the presentation, but a lot of these things can be applied to small brands as well. So don't worry if you're a small brand or a small business, these can apply to you also. So the three main things I wanted to cover today are identifying your buyer personas, that's who is your ideal customer, who is your ideal audience, how to create unique social media campaigns. So now that you've had a presence on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc., how do you take that presence to the next level? How do you connect your audience that might be offline versus online if they're two different audiences? We're going to look at a couple different examples of brands that did that really well. And then we'll also look at a couple social media crises. So unfortunately, we never want a crisis to happen, but if they should happen, how can you be prepared and how can you handle a situation in the right manner? So jumping right into identifying buyer personas. So what is a buyer persona? It's basically your composite picture of the actual people who buy your product or take in your service or whatever it might be. Simply put, they're your ideal customer. And there are a lot of benefits to identifying who your ideal customer is. If you can identify your ideal customer or potential client or whatever the case might be, you can have a greater understanding of who they are, what their needs are, what their wants are, what their desires are, and that ensures that you and the people in your company or organization understand your audience better. And once you understand your audience better, you can understand the problems that they face, and you can craft messages specifically to them. And as a result of that, this communication will be highly relevant, and hopefully your messages will be more powerful. And of course, in social media, when reach and impressions and all of those different stats are so important to your bottom line and to what your boss probably wants to see in your social media presence, these are important ways to make sure that you're crafting messaging that your audience wants to see and engage with, and it also makes sure that your marketing campaigns will be very effective. And then from there, you can also get better insight into your audience. You can figure out, you can dive deeper into analysis of what these personas are, which make better customers, which are actually buying from you, and which will have a better lifetime value and be loyal to your brand. So there are a couple different ways that you can go about creating an online persona or figuring out who your ideal customer is. Looking at social media is one great way to do that. You can do surveys on social media. You can look at even your competitors as well. There are also a variety of great tools that will help you really pinpoint who your ideal customer is. And I put a few of them on here: makemypersona.com, upcloseandpersona.com, userbox.com. And that top one is actually from HubSpot, and they have a pretty great program available that helps you really define who your target buyer persona is. And also, as simple as looking at Google Analytics, there's some great demographics data there. You can look at age, gender, geographic region where your audiences come from. So take a look at who's visiting your website already and use that data to inform the messaging that you create for social. So to look at a couple case studies, as I mentioned, I work primarily in the hospitality space, and Four Seasons is not a client, but they've always done a great job of setting a high bar in what they do on social and in the digital marketing space. So they have obviously a variety of different hotels, and a big problem in the hotel space is competing with OTAs, which are brands like Kayak, Expedia, Travelocity, and basically hotels want people to book through their own sites rather than these other sites so that they don't have to pay a commission to those other sites. So Four Seasons set out, they hired an agency to create a buyer persona profiles for their new app so that they could then create this app to their specific ideal customer, despite the variety of customers that they obviously have. So in taking a look at a couple of the buyer personas that they put together, this is just one example of kind of how specific you can get with it. So they made up, Mark is a senior consultant at a prestigious company. He commutes. He has a wife and child. They would probably want to go on travel vacations. He wants to be able to look at his app, his mobile device on the train while he's commuting, things like that. And then conversely, Sarah, 32, project manager. She lives in the Bay Area. She's more of a free spirit. So as you can tell, these two personas are very different, but they both fall into the audience of who Four Seasons is trying to market to. So once they've kind of really defined these two different scenarios and who these people are in their audience, they were then able to create sketches and start some testing regarding how they were going to proceed in building their app. So they integrated the different personas, and they started designing an app with a mobile concierge in mind, because this version would enable destination discovery and booking, and also take care of other travel-related needs that a user might have when booking a vacation. And then from there, they started doing wireframes. They wanted to solve pain points that all these different personas might have of wanting to easily browse and look for travel destinations based on their group or season or the purpose of their travel. So from here, then they were able to go on and actually create the app. So that's kind of, this is obviously an app example, but it was a great case study on creating a buyer persona, and then from there the process of going through and making a campaign, or in this case an app, happen as a result of what they put together. Another great example of a brand that does this really, really well on social specifically is Taco Bell. Taco Bell is very targeted the last couple of years to the millennial audience. And as you can see here, these are two different examples. Last year, when they debuted their new Doritos Locos Taco, they did it on Snapchat. So they went on Twitter and they posted a tweet saying, we're going to be sending all of our friends on Snapchat a special announcement tomorrow. Go and, friend us on Snapchat if you want to be in the know. And since the younger audience is very active on Snapchat, they were able to get this inside scoop of the new product from Taco Bell very easily. And similarly, this Facebook post on the right here is very recent, and you can kind of tell just the overall vibe of it is very youthful. Everything from the mobile phone being on the table to the accessories of the girl eating the taco, you can tell it's very, very millennial oriented. So they do a really nice job of targeting millennials and giving them messaging and photographs that they would want to see when visiting Taco Bell or talking about Taco Bell to their peers on social media. So with that in mind, I think we have a poll to start here.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the poll real quick, and you'll see a little pop-up, and everybody can give me your answer, if you will, please. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to take a look at this. It's basically asking you, have you done research on your target audience? I think really, everybody, you can see number 3 there. It says yes, but not in official capacity. But, really, have you done real research, not just I wonder who my audience is, right? Yes, no, or yes, but not in an official capacity. Again, have you done research on your target audience? Yes, no, or yes, but not in an official capacity. So I'm going to let this go just a little bit longer. We have about 60% voted, so if everybody can jump in there real quick. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. And I'm going to share the results just so everybody can see. It's pretty mixed. A lot of people are thinking about doing their target audience, research. Some are actively doing it, some not in an official capacity, and I think most people are at least making an effort, which I think is pretty good. I think that's pretty cool. I do have one question before you go on. When we look at the examples of the big brands, with the persona building, and persona building in general seems very tiresome, very a long process, a lot of work. Do you feel that all businesses, no matter whether they're small, medium, or large, really need to go through the persona building exercise? Or do you think it's just like icing on the cake? It's just an extra thing that they can do. Is it essential or just an extra?
It's probably just an extra for most brands, unless you have a very, very specific campaign that you're doing that would be extremely beneficial to have this type of research done. Again, there's a lot of tools online that help you do it pretty easily, so it's pretty easy to do kind of on a smaller scale if you just need it for immediate reference and social media, needs for planning a social media calendar or something like that. But if you were doing like a major campaign that a lot of dollars and a lot of effort was being put into, it would probably be beneficial to make sure that you're targeting the right people when you do that campaign.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right, so moving on to the next section, some social media case studies. So again, these look at a couple different big brands, but keep in mind they can be applicable to smaller businesses as well. A couple things we want to look at, so taking social media and kind of merging the online and offline experience. And we kind of mentioned with hotels specifically, we've seen a lot that some hotels have a very active Facebook audience, and then they have a very loyal audience that comes and stays at their hotels, but those two audiences aren't necessarily the same audience. So that's a big thing that we run into is how do you get your on-site visitors, customers activated to share socially when they're on your premise or engaging with your brand. So just want to share an example here. The USA interactive installation of the Army Navy game last year, the interactive agency created an experience for this game last year, and they included a variety of different things. There were green screen photo stations where people could take photos and then share them immediately to social media. There were iPads throughout the venue. Images that were taken and shared on social were portrayed on a large screen at the venue, and there was a Twitter wall and a lot of things like that. So they did a great job of integrating the social experience to the people who are on site at this particular game. And they saw a lot of good results as a result of this. There were people taking photos, over 1,500 photos were taken. Engagement times for the campaign elements were 45 to 110 seconds, which for social media, which is very fast-paced, people tend to move quickly from one thing to another. This is actually a pretty long duration of time that people were engaged with the different elements on social. There were over 2,000 emails sent, 7,000 people viewed the promotions, and there were about 68,000 impressions generated from this one day. So you can see it was pretty successful, and some of these ideas are great for implementing them into your own. If you're a brick and mortar business, set up a selfie station or set up a booth where people, just an iPad even, where people can easily take a photo and tweet out that they're at your venue. A lot of museums now have Twitter walls up in their different venues, and so even twitterfall.com is a great website that broadcasts tweets. It's free to use. You can just set it up on a projector. And there are a lot of different ways to incorporate social into the on-site experience so that your users on-site are able to easily share and are activated to share as well. That's another major aspect. So here's a couple examples of a cafe, of another business that had some iPads out and were encouraging people to be social inside their different restaurants and different venues.
And just throw in a real quick comment, if you don't mind. I really think that that's something really amazing with what's happening right now. I think we're seeing a merging of traditional marketing, and we're seeing a merging of that with the social elements. Do you feel like that will continue, where people, really start using more in-store and in real-life type of applications in their marketing campaigns, or you think it's just a couple people doing it here and there?
I think it'll start to be more commonplace. I think I've definitely seen more so now. I mean, even in the past year, the growth of different places that even a local place near my house now has like a selfie station set up, small, tiny little shop, and they have a station dedicated to social. I think it'll start becoming more common just as people are more socially engaged, as they are on their phones all the time and they are more active in sharing socially. Obviously, again, it depends on your business, but a lot of times I think it is becoming more common and will continue to become more
Yeah, I
common.
have a habit of like every time I see like a restaurant or something, they have like an iPad or something, the first thing I end up doing is going and checking what their review scores are, and they always tend to have a ton of reviews. And so it seems that like that opportunity for people to participate does have a direct effect in them actually standing out from their competition. So I think that's a great
Certainly.
example.
Yeah, certainly. Not only are people sharing socially as a result of those venues being proactive about incorporating social, but then they're also talking about the venue incorporating social in their social posts
Exactly,
as
yeah.
well. So they're
That's
getting the
awesome.
extra kind of buzz from that. Another case study was AT&T's Be the Fan campaign that they launched last year. So they had Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family. He issued a challenge to fans to see if they could respond. He asked them to respond on Twitter, Vine, and Instagram. So again, he's kind of targeting that younger audience that's on Vine and Instagram. Sports fans, obviously, with the Be the Fan hashtag, and then they created a landing page where all of these different posts were accumulated so people can go see their posts and look at other users' posts as well. So there were a lot of great things about this campaign, and again, it did pretty well also. They saw a good pickup in higher engagement on Twitter, 4% increase in sweepstakes entries, social conversions up almost 300%, and 200 million consumers were engaged in the program across all networks in some form. And again, you might be thinking, okay, well, I don't have a celebrity to help out with my campaign. That's fine. You can still learn from these different ideas that these brands are doing. A lot of people really like these challenge components or the gamification of social, so that tends to be very popular. So even on a smaller scale, do a contest. You know, issue a challenge of some kind. There's a lot of different ways that smaller brands can issue challenges and get their fans involved in social in a variety of different ways. Here's a couple examples here. A variety of different brands went to social and created these different challenges for people to do on social. So it can be something as simple as, you know, check in for 10% off your order or whatever the case might be, but issuing challenges, encouraging people to share your hashtag or your brand, whatever it might be. And then certainly the idea of having a page where all of those entries live is a great way to get people to share with their friends, like, oh, look, I was featured on such and such business's, you know, website. That's really cool. So that's kind of stuff that will get featured even more as a result of your efforts, even if
Kind of like kind of like
it's small.
kind of like me saying I challenge everybody to use the hashtag SEJ ThinkTank and go find a good example of this and share
Yes,
it with us, right? Share your
share it
favorite
with us
example of a challenge that you've participated in. Seriously though, if anybody's participated in one of these challenges, go find that material and share it with that hashtag for us. Cheers.
Yeah, that'd be great. So moving on now to online crisis. So obviously, you know, when you issue these different campaigns or challenges or contests or promotions, whatever you're doing on social, you never hope or plan for a crisis to happen, but unfortunately sometimes they do. And there's different kinds of crisis that can occur on social media. So I wanted to kind of define what I mean by an online crisis. So I think there's three different main types of crisis that happen on social media. There's customer service issues, so someone used your product or service and they just genuinely had a bad experience with it and they're complaining about it. The other might be that you screwed up. You sent out wrong information, you said something incorrect, you said something that was interpreted in a different way in which you meant it to be interpreted. And then finally, there's the third one, maybe you're being shady. You've done something wrong. And we're going to take a look at an example of each of these different three types of crises. But no matter what the type of crises that you endure, you always want to do these three things. You want to take responsibility. Don't be defensive. It's not that people always want an apology per se. They want to know that they're being heard and that you're addressing their issue. So that's the most important thing. Respond and clarify in a timely manner. Make sure you clarify what was meant by what you said if something was misinterpreted, and do so in a timely manner so that people don't continue talking poorly about your brand as a result of what they think you meant, even though that wasn't correct. And then finally, consider the best platform. So obviously Twitter, being only 140 characters, might not be the best place to, you know, blatantly try to address an issue, but you can start, you know, you can put out a tweet and then link somewhere else to properly address whatever you're trying to convey. So to take a look at a couple examples of these scenarios, the first one would be, this would be a customer service example. So Xfinity posted in December about a Christmas sweepstakes they were doing, and unfortunately they had one of their customers complain that they haven't had service or haven't had sound on their TV. And, you know, unfortunately this happens where you post something, you know, that you intend to be positive and someone comes and complains on it about something totally different. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but it happens. So there are a couple things that Xfinity did right and a couple things they could improve upon with the way that they handled this comment. First is that they did respond to Ronald personally. They addressed him by name. Sean signed it personally, so that added a real human element to the Xfinity brand. They responded in a very kind manner. They apologized. They took responsibility. So that was great. That was awesome. The one thing that they could have improved upon is that they waited 2 weeks to respond. So we don't know in that time if Ronald switched cable providers. We don't know what happened. He could have moved on. So make sure to respond promptly. And even if it's the kind of case where the social media manager doesn't know, if you're the social media manager, you don't know exactly the right way to respond, still you could still say, Ronald, I'm looking into this for you. Still respond and say something so that they know that you're handling the situation, even if you can't adequately address the scenario right there on social. Just always make sure to say something. And then another great thing to do is to take it offline. So, email Ronald and say, I'm sorry you're experiencing that. Please email us or customer support at XYZ email, and they'll be happy to help you. And that way it shows that you addressed the situation, you took responsibility publicly to anyone who sees the post, but then you and Ronald can handle the matter publicly behind the scenes. So another example that I wanted to address, so this was an example of something being misinterpreted. So during the Sochi Olympics last year, McDonald's sent out a tweet, a hashtag campaign called Cheers to Sochi, which they intended to send support to the Olympians. And unfortunately, there was some controversy surrounding the destination of Sochi because the way that they were treating the LGBT community. So people were upset about that on Twitter. And when McDonald's launched this campaign, they got a lot of backlash that they didn't intend. And what they intended to convey was, for the Olympians and all that, but they got a lot of backlash for promoting Sochi when Sochi wasn't treating everyone equally. So they did a couple things well, again, and a couple things that they could improve upon for next time. One was that they addressed the issue very promptly on Twitter. They conveyed their point, and then they also linked to a further explanation. So this is a great way to handle something on Twitter specifically. You don't have a lot of room to respond. You can take it offline, but you can still convey, we support human rights and all of our athletes. Here's what we meant. And they did a really nice response on their website addressing exactly what they meant and what they didn't mean, and that they support the Olympians and everyone in Sochi. But unfortunately, they had waited a couple days to put out this tweet. There was several days between when the first backlash occurred specifically for McDonald's and when they actually put this out. So again, in that time, people were still tweeting about it. Word was spreading that there was a controversy surrounding McDonald's, and they could have nipped it in the bud just a little bit sooner. So make sure to reply promptly, even if you have to kind of gather, get all your ducks in a row, still reply promptly with a statement so that people know what exactly you meant and that you're on giving a more thorough response. So finally, this last case study you may have heard of. It was pretty popular a year or two ago when it occurred. It's pretty much now the epitome of what not to do on social. Amy's Baking Company, a small bakery in Arizona, I believe it was, they had an array of poor Yelp reviews and they freaked out on social media. And rather than taking responsibility, they blatantly criticized their fans. I don't know if you can read the text here, I know it's pretty small, but they basically said, we're going to plot to come together on all of you, you're all punks. And then they wrote in all caps, we're not freaking out, piss off, a bunch of other words I won't say on the live webinar. They also used a lot of vulgarity. They were not at all, mature, responsible adults here, responding in a way that was fitting of any type of business. So obviously, don't ever talk to your fans like that. Don't instigate. They're now kind of the poster child for what not to do on social and how not to handle a crisis. So make sure, obviously, don't ever do anything like this, or you'll end up being used in a presentation on what not to do in social media. So one other case study I wanted to share was one that actually happened to one of my clients this last holiday season. We had a holiday recipe contest for a hotel, and really nice contest. We asked users to submit their recipes for the holidays, and then people voted actually on Christmas Day, and a winner was selected at the Christmas Day brunch. So some finalists were narrowed down, and then a winner was selected on Christmas Day. And part of the rules for this Facebook house contest were that the recipes submitted had to be original family recipes. They couldn't be recipes that were posted elsewhere online. And what that rule was intended to convey was that you couldn't go pull a recipe off marthastewart.com and post it as your own recipe for this contest. It had to be your own original recipe. And so this contest ran really smoothly. It was narrowed down to 12 finalists. A winner was selected on Christmas Day brunch. It was a key lime pie recipe that people at the brunch actually got to taste and really enjoyed, and this girl was selected as the winner for her key lime pie recipe. And unfortunately, after she was announced, another finalist who was not happy that she did not win emailed us and said, I found this recipe on this other blog. And so what ended up happening was basically this girl that submitted her family's key lime pie recipe, it had been posted on her mom's blog a year or two ago, and she didn't know about that. And basically, we had to kind of internally discuss, amongst these marketing leaders at the hotel and our marketing team here, we had to discuss, do we disqualify this winner because what we intended to convey was that the recipe wasn't stolen and it wasn't stolen, but it actually wasn't. We were genuinely getting ready for some sort of crisis if either the winner that we were going to disqualify was going to get mad, or if this girl who feels like she wrongly didn't win when this other girl, allegedly cheated or whatever. And so it ended up being a really kind of a silly problem, but it was a very real problem and a very real discussion that we had to have, and we claimed it Desertgate. But we ended up having to disqualify the winner because the rules did blatantly say that the recipe couldn't be posted elsewhere online, and it was. So we had to disqualify the winner, but we did give her a prize. But it was an interesting kind of exercise for us in making sure when launching contests like this, especially with being online and social, to make sure that your rules are crystal clear what they mean, make sure they can't be misinterpreted, and make sure that everyone's on the same page of what they mean. And, if one winner gets, if a finalist gets mad about someone else being the winner, how are you going to handle that? We now know to have a plan in place for those kinds of things to happen. So those are all the case studies for crises. I wanted to do another quick poll here and find out how many of you have a plan in place for handling a social media crisis, or if you don't, but maybe plan to now after learning about these different stories.
Awesome. So as Debbie mentioned, the question is going to be, do you have a plan in place for handling social media crisis? Yes, no, but I plan to now. You've fully scared everybody into deciding they need to have a plan. So we'll give people, like I said, a couple minutes here. We're not going to wait forever. I know some people might be asleep at the wheel, and but we'll give everybody a chance to jump in there and give a vote, and then about maybe 5-10 seconds more, and then I'll go ahead and close it out and share the results. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out and then share the results. And pretty unanimously, people are saying no, but they plan to now, which I think is, I think it's a good thing to note that even I don't have a plan for a social media crisis. And I was writing down some notes myself and have a couple follow-up questions just on how to create a plan and what you need to consider for that plan, which I'll ask here in a little bit after everybody else's questions. But I think that's it's not too shocking. I think that some people do, some people don't, and a lot of people realize that they need to. So I think that was pretty good. Give us a second to pull it away. Okay.
All right. So just in summary, identifying your buyer persona can be extremely useful if you have a major campaign to do, or if you have some very targeted messaging that you need to craft for your social media presence. Once you have, obviously, a great social media presence in your ideal audience, you can create some unique social media campaigns to link that online and offline experience. And then, once you create and launch those campaigns or promotions, whatever they be, make sure you have at least a brief idea of a plan in place in case anything comes up or goes awry during the execution of your social media campaign.
Awesome. I really love, personally, it might seem strange, but I love the examples of the crisis. I think most people like to see what happens. I think there's a lot to be learned from other people's examples of what they do and they don't do, but I think there's always a lot of questions that come in there, and that will lead us kind of into some of our Q&A, session. We have, a good chunk of time, at least about 10-15 minutes. I think we can answer some questions. When you were talking about the crisis and people having these crises, do you need to address every situation? As you said with the the Sochi thing, I mean, it's not really their fault, what's going on. I mean, people have contracts with country. I mean, people can't take, huge stands sometimes as a business. That's just not something they're, in the place to do or capable of doing. And obviously they handled that situation well, but what point do you address every person who has a complaint, or, how do you make that judgment call on who to really address and who not to address?
Sure. So yeah, I think it is a case-by-case basis situation. I think in the case of McDonald's, because they meant one thing and it was interpreted a different way, they needed to address that. That was the kind of the component, as opposed to them needing to take a stance on the Sochi Olympics. But I think it is a case-by-case basis, and you kind of have to, I think, read the situation, read the person that's complaining. So you can obviously tell, and we see this a lot on SEJ too, you can tell if someone's kind of just being a troll, just saying something to be, just to be mean and to be picky, or if someone is genuinely, an active social user that is normally pretty civil, that has a genuine complaint, those obviously need to be addressed. As I kind of mentioned earlier, one great thing to do is to address it publicly but then take it offline. That's usually a pretty safe option across the board, is to respond in a civil manner, obviously take responsibility, publicly so that people can see that you've addressed it, that you're not shying from it, that you're not ignoring it, and then take it offline. So talk to the person either privately, give them your email, ask for their email, and take it offline. And more often than not, especially in customer service related industries, people will go back later and thank you for resolving their issue. And of course on Yelp, this is pretty common when businesses go back and address experiences that went poorly, and someone leaves a poor Yelp review, and they go back and then give them a good experience, and they go back and revise what they said before. So a lot of that happens pretty often.
And when you're talking about, just to follow up on that, when you identify, let's say you make the judgment call, this person's a troll, this person's just, being, lashing out for the fun of it or whatever. Can you delete that? When is it okay to actually remove that from the conversation to avoid, the whole issue of it? When is that, in your opinion, okay?
Well, I think one thing that's great to do is to add some sort of disclaimer on your Facebook page or whatever the case might be, and say conversation or comments that don't directly contribute productively to a conversation, that contain profanity or anything insulting to anyone. Have a list of things that will not be tolerated, and if these trolly comments fall into any of those categories, then delete them, because you have that disclaimer on your page. And some of these trolls will say something, kind of silly that doesn't necessarily directly relate to what you said, or I'm trying to think of a specific example and I can't right now, but we see that quite a bit where it's not directly productive to the conversation. There's nothing that you can say that will help mend the situation. If that's the case, I think it's okay to delete it. On the other hand, certainly there's a lot of times people will comment and you should respond. So if that's the case, discuss internally with your team, whatever the situation might be, how to best respond and handle the situation, and then go, move forward based on your best judgment on how to respond to that person, based on whatever they said.
One of the other follow-up questions I have, I'm going to mix with a question that we have from Tiffany here, who, she was asking, is handling customer service directly tied to social listening? Like, do you focus on where people are listening, to focus on whether or not you handle it? Like, if nobody's hearing it, do you still address it? And I think that my add-on to that would be, let's say you're on Twitter and you have, a small account, and it's, do you even address it, and do you address it across the board? So if I have a problem on Twitter, do I have to address that on Facebook, and do I have to address that on Google+, and do I need to write a blog post about it, or do I just handle it in the channel where the issue is occurring?
So I think it depends. So I think if, for example, if there's a troll on Twitter that says someone tweeted something negative to you, I think it's okay to just tweet them back and respond to them, as opposed to if you as a brand have a major issue that is commented on in one channel, but it's a bigger issue at hand that it's important for your customers and audience to know. And if that's the case, then sprinkle it upon the various channels as well. So I think it depends on if it's just one person causing mischief on one specific channel, you can kind of keep it there and keep it kind of contained there. But if it's a bigger issue, kind of like the McDonald's thing with your brand in general and your brand image, and there's getting press around it or whatever the case might be, if that's the case, share the clarifying message in as many places as possible to clarify what was meant.
Would you include that in like a blog post on your site, or do you think that, when do you actually think that you should trickle beyond social media?
I think if it's a major issue that affects your customers.
Okay.
Another example that came to mind, that's not in this presentation, but Buffer last year was, I think they got hacked. And they did an excellent job of communicating to their users. They did a blog post about it. They were like live blog updating. They were posting on all their social channels. And they did a great job, and they were praised afterwards by various publications for the way that they handled this. And this could have been a very bad crisis. I think some of their user data was compromised by this hacker, and they did a great job of being very candid. We were hacked. We're on it. Here's what we're doing. We're finding out what of your data was compromised. And they were just very candid about it and what was going on, and they kept people updated in real time. And if you Google that situation, find the blog post, and read the comments on that blog post, their users are very pleased and were in fact praising them for even though they had an online crisis, their users were actually praising them for the way that they handled it.
So one of the questions that got brought up in the discussion, in the thread of all these questions that keep coming in, is that a lot of the examples were business to customer. Do you have any, can you think of any B2B examples of utilize, I'm guessing this would be more to either, the offline, marketing tactics or social tactics that are employed. Do you have any examples of B2B environments that have benefited from that?
Ooh, I think certainly networking events, that might be B2B if you're a B2B brand and you're meeting other people that could potentially be your customer. Being mindful of social media in that regard, I think sometimes I'll meet people and then we'll connect on LinkedIn and then all of a sudden they'll email me and try to sell me something. That's very, very much a turnoff. So I think just being conscious of building those relationships and not just using social as a selling tool, but using it as a relationship tool and cultivating those relationships to make people, trust you and know you and want to work with you as opposed to explicitly selling to them right when you meet them. So I think there's a line. Obviously, LinkedIn is the big B2B.
And we see that a lot with conferences too. I mean, that's essentially other businesses at the conferences. People do the pass around the USB sticks, where they do the go around and do things and things like that. So there's a lot of things like that that can also be done in the B2B space. I think it's just a matter of the venue in a lot of places. So the next question we have from some viewers is, how effective is user-generated content in social media campaigns?
It can be great. I mean, it depends on the campaign, but user-generated content, I mean, you can have your users generate the content for you, like the AT&T example where they created that landing page, I think AT&TBeTheFan.com, which was the name of their campaign and hashtag that they used, and they created a landing page that housed all of the entries. So that's a great means of creating an environment where on your website, so it gives you good traffic back to your website as well. That's a great example of having user-generated content, and it creates a very visually appealing page. It gives people somewhere to go to find their content on a major brand's page, which gets them excited, which hopefully means they'll share it with their friends, and then more people will enter. So it does depend on the campaign, but there are certainly ways to use user-generated content and to ask users for content that you can use on your own social media channels.
Yeah, I mean, when you brought up the point earlier of giving people a challenge, right? I always tell people, look, contests are great. Contest challenges are a great way of creating user-generated content. Tell us your favorite quote. Like your example, give us your favorite recipe. A lot of times you can also do that to where you can put in the terms that anything that's submitted is yours to use. So a lot of times they'll say, take a picture with our product, or take a funny picture, or do a funny video, or do something like these as a challenge. And you might get thousands of images that you can now use, for any elements that you need to within your site or within your content. So I think absolutely user-generated content can be super effective in social. And we even actually on a lot of our Facebook pages that we own, one thing we do is we try to get contributors to put in user-generated content on the actual Facebook page so that we have updates to share and schedule out that are based on, user-generated content. So we have some that are quotes based, and we'll, submit your favorite quote, meme image, and we do a lot of that to help drive user-generated content for that. So I think it can be super effective. Next question, do you think major media outlets would benefit from creating buyer personas?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it would probably depend on if it's like a general media outlet that just reports news or whatever the case might be. They probably have a wider, broader audience, so it might not be as applicable. But if it's a media outlet that's very, very direct and targeted, then I think it would be beneficial to kind of really narrow down who their precise audience is. If they're going after, say, if it's a publication going after entrepreneurs, for example, they can really find out what kind of entrepreneurs are their ideal audience, maybe look at their website and see, are they male or female? I mean, if they have 80% female readership, for example, they might want to shift their messaging to be more geared toward women as opposed to men, as a simple example. But things like that can be very useful. If you have a very targeted niche that you're going after, it can certainly be useful to kind of hone down a little more deeply into who exactly your audience is.
And I would actually go further and say even if you don't have a targeted audience, I think it's extremely effective. I mean, most sites typically have some sort of a structuring that, discusses different categories, different topic points. So from a identifying how to structure different category sections, a lot of the major media have different views for different pages based on how different audiences are going to digest that content, whether it's more visual or whether it has more video or whether it's just text-based or so forth. And I think also when it comes to identifying your content that you want to create, I think it's good to know, if you're a complete broad spectrum and you're going to talk about technology, well, you need to know what in tech your audience is interested in so that you know what content to write about and what content to create. So I think, coming up with personas, in those situations would actually be extremely useful.
Definitely.
Maybe possibly the last question we have. This is an interesting question, it's got a couple points, so I'll just read through it. How do we get more people to comment on our posts? Mostly we post useful information, but it doesn't link back to our site. Having a contest might be a good idea, but our target is parents. I wonder how many would respond to that. So how do you get people to comment on your posts or interact more in general?
Sure. So, creating calls to action can be useful if you want to make sure if you're doing any Facebook advertising. Obviously, I don't know too much about what you've been doing so far, but if you're doing Facebook advertising, actually, this kind of ties into the buyer persona. But you can create custom audiences in Facebook, so you can actually take if you have an email list or if you want to look at who your audience is on your website, you can create custom audiences on Facebook. If you Google that, it'll come up, and you can create audiences that you can put even just a little bit of money, like 10 or 20 bucks, and boost your posts directly to that audience. And that might be really useful in just picking up the engagement. And then once those people start engaging with your post, they'll hopefully see your posts more often because people will see the posts. The more they engage with a brand, the more they see their posts in their newsfeed. So that might be a good experiment. You can also create lookalike audiences with the custom audiences. So it'll take your audience that you upload into Facebook and create that custom audience, and then it will take people who have similar likes, interests, interactions on Facebook and create an audience that looks just like that audience, and it will market it to them as well. So that might be a good way to get more fans that are qualified leads to like and engage with your posts as well.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, and I was going to say, and video right now is one of the top types of content on Facebook, so doing more videos as opposed to photos or links. Certainly you can include a link back to your website as well, but testing out doing more videos that are uploaded directly to Facebook might be useful as well.
Yeah, we're doing a big study on that right now. We just finished up, and it looks pretty positive, for, I'm not, going to say 100% until we get the data, but it looks pretty good that, embedded videos on Facebook are getting a little bit better of a reach than, using third-party videos in YouTube and so forth. One thing I would add to that, as far as how do you get engagement, I think don't reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of parents and there's a lot of mothers and there's a lot of Facebook pages that are out there. I would spend some time and identify the ones that are out there. I would find out which topics they have that are getting more interaction. You can go through and you can start to look at, hey, whenever they talk about this topic, they're getting a lot more comments. Whenever they do this, they're getting a lot more likes, a lot more shares. So you can go and learn what topic points within your specific target audience, because they have a similar target audience, which topic points are actually getting the interaction that you want to have. And you can take those same topics and start to focus some of your content around that, use the call to actions that you see that are working, use the imagery that you see is working, and you can really shortcut a lot of the discovery on that type of content for your pages.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think that is all the questions that we have. So, I'd like to thank everyone, including you, Debbie, for, coming and participating in this awesome webinar and giving us your time. I do want to take a moment just to kind of reiterate that if anybody has any additional questions, anything that comes up, that you Oh, man, I forgot to ask this question. We are going to continue to look at the hashtag SEJ Think Tank for a little while longer on Twitter. If any questions come in through Twitter, we'll make sure we answer them when we do the recap post that will come out shortly. So if you do have some follow-up questions, please feel free to use that hashtag and mention them to us in Twitter. You can look up Debbie. You can follow her on LinkedIn, follow her on Twitter as well. What's your Twitter tag again? You have a slightly, the big
The Big
Debowski.
Debowski. The Big
Yeah.
Debowski.
So make sure you follow Debbie, and then don't forget that we're doing these webinars pretty regularly, and we have a really interesting webinar that's coming up. It's going to be on May 20th, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. But we actually have Keith Good. I'm going to say Kevin and mess it all up. Keith Good, and he's going to be talking about building business cases for SEO. Essentially, he's going to help you understand how to align your SEO needs with your business goals, how to get the help you need, and to how to measure the success of what you're doing. And Keith has an enormous amount of experience in this place. I mean, he was the global SEO tech lead for Dell for over 3 years. So the guy, without question, has a good background in dealing with technical SEO on a very large scale. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a really insightful webinar, and I really would recommend making sure you register for that and come and visit us again for that. And I'll let Debbie close us out.
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for your time and for joining us today, and hope to see you on the 20th as well. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.